Welcome to another Gray Matter community webinar, this time AI and Gaming, featuring the TTI team. Hope you enjoy.
So today's topic is going to be AI and gaming. We're going to talk about practical applications in the industry, ways it's already been used, ways that people would like to use it, and how we're using generative intelligence in new designs by leveraging things like robotic processing, automation, and different new tools like that. So to give you guys an idea of who I am and my background in the industry, my name is Eladine. I run an anonymous project known as Tenebros Tales Interactive, where I have the privilege of being able to talk with people in privileged positions that work in tech and cybersecurity with new technology. And I find ways to weave that into different storylines. I used to work at a couple different AAA studios, one of them being Riot Games before they got acquired by Tencent, and the second one being ArenaNet with their PvP development of Guild Wars 2. And though it never went anywhere, I did consult briefly with EA for Dawnstar, which was another MOBA game that was trying to capitalize on the PvP genre at the time. So I've got a pretty extensive background in gaming, content design, and creativity. All of that sort of led to my interest in AI and sitting in on some MIT classes that I may not have necessarily been invited to, which is always fun. So we've got myself, Tenebros Tales Interactive, which is the project we're working with today, and then one of my editors and co-authors is going to be joining us. That's going to be Turtler. I'm going to go ahead and pass over his own introduction to him and not talk over him.
Greetings, everyone. Firstly, I am honored to be here, and thank you, Eladine, for this. Secondly, I came under the weather very quickly in the last couple of days, so I have a bit of a phlegm in my chest, so I apologize if that pops up. I do not have Eladine's expansive background, but I have been an avid gamer and general student of computing for many years, in part because it is how I write most of that, and the main subject I will talk on touches on that. I am also a history nerd. I came on to this, I'm involved in various bits and bobs, software preservation, gaming. I came into this project very happenstance, like through character AI and randomly deciding to send a friend invite to Eladine, and it has been quite the ride since then. And in the meantime, poor Eladine has to hear about me coming up with random plot ideas from 19th century Germany, or how to transcribe The King in Yellow. In any case, it is good to be here. And
All right. Thank you so much, Turtler, for the introduction. Speaking of introductions, one of the things that we need to talk about regarding AI specifically is the community. And it's the first thing I want to go ahead and touch on in this. AI has a couple different kinds of communities when it comes to it. My community and this community that you all are a part of is a very friendly, interactive community, one that is very supporting and one that wants to genuinely uplift and share knowledge. It's a great thing to see. I want to be clear, though, before we get started, not every AI community is like that. There are actually a lot of AI communities that have driven tons of knowledge and research that we're going to touch on today that are quite the opposite of what we see here. So it's important to keep in mind as we're moving forward that AI and the people who are involved in it, those communities, they're really shaped by the people who speak, the people who get involved with the day-to-day aspects. And that's something that we go through this presentation, you should definitely keep in mind, because you entirely have the ability to shape your communities, the way people interact with AI and the way that people see and are presented to it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll into the next slide. So let's talk about AI in game development as it stands right this very moment. So AI in game development right now is being used in a couple different AAA studios. No Man's Sky uses the very basic AI model for procedural generation. StarCraft 2 is known to use the same similar, not procedural generation rather, but similar mini models of AI to go ahead and guide units that the enemy has, so your NPCs. And even GTA 5 is employing a lot of this, mostly to take off the load on the graphics card. So it's important to keep in mind that AI game design, that is already a thing that we have been leveraging for years, to the point where it's deeply ingrained in the development cycle. We want to go ahead and use this kind of generative and general intelligence to guide different aspects of game design that we don't want players to have to deal with. A really great example of this is, funny enough, I've never played the game, don't particularly care for the style, but it's Fortnite. Fortnite, of all things, leverages this really well. They do this by making sure that everybody basically has a chance to win. If you get into I think it's like called a battle royale anyways, it's a one person comes out on top kind of scenario, King of the Hill game, right? There are chances that you will be dumped in a game full of nothing but bots. And the reason that this is done is so that everybody gets the chance to win. Everybody gets the chance to feel good about themselves, and everybody has the chance to go ahead and experience gameplay that isn't just constantly getting ground into the dirt by a bunch of high-level Smurfs trying to grind experience or a good feeling for themselves, right? So there are different ways that we're already handling this bot integration exceptionally well in today's gaming. And I'm so sorry. I'm going to go ahead and let Turtler take it over for the next slide, because he's got a very in-depth analysis regarding how AI and different games sort of evolve.
Thank you kindly, Eladine. This is the example, like if Eladine provides...
I'm so sorry. One moment. I'm so sorry. I'm a jerk. I forgot. I'm supposed to pause in between slides for questions for everybody. So if anybody has any questions about anything, to address what Cutie Cat is talking about, No Man's Sky being years ago. Yeah, we've been using AI in development since StarCraft 2's development cycle. What we're talking about is what's called a mini model. It's not AI in the way that we think about AI right now, but it is a very basic form that's helped develop what we're seeing right now with these generative intelligence models, right? So even though these games were published years ago, they've got these little systems that are sort of proprietary to their own niche. So for No Man's Sky, it's procedural generation. So when you step forward and you see things loaded in the background, Skyrim does a lot of the same things. That's how that works. But procedural generation in Skyrim is set because the world is determined. Procedural generation in No Man's Sky is a lot more expansive and infinite. That's correct. It's exactly like Minecraft's procedural terrain generation. All right. If we don't have any more questions, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Turtler. I figured this one would kind of be a gimme. Um, most people in general have an understanding that some basic level of AI is being used in game design already. But on that note, something that's important to note is the size of these models, right? We talked about a little bit about how these models are small and they're tailored to these specific niches. There was a large conference this year called DeFitic, where a bunch of tech giants in the industry get together with the military and go ahead and talk shop, right? Salesforce was there and they were demonstrating a model that was small enough that they were housing it on every last piece of it locally on this tiny little laptop. And they were parsing star systems and labeling them with RPA. And you could just sit there and watch the AI scan the night sky and go ahead and dissect each star and tell you about it in real time as it was aggregating the data. It was very, very incredible to see just how far these systems have come and different ways that they're going to be able to be developed. And on that note of useless rambling, Turtler, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it over, and I'm going to go ahead and start getting into your slides.
Thank you kindly. Now, I wanted to, if Eladine gave us a broad overview, I wanted to give a more in-depth case study of this in the case of, and as you can see, my peak PowerPoint creation. But in the subject of Age of Empires 2, one of a very StarCraft-like real-time strategy game, which allows us to see how a given AI application has evolved over time. And if you can see next slide, as you can see, like I said, peak PowerPoint performance. The Age of Empires is deemed to be one of the classic game franchises, first released in the late 90s. And in particular, the game that we will be focusing on now, Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings, and its derivatives, first released in 1999 and its expansion in 2000, which focused on roughly the medieval era between the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. It's generally regarded to be the highlight of the series and immensely influential. It then had a re-release in HD re-release in 2015, which also featured an AI evolution. And then it had another re-release, a definitive edition released in 2019, which is still receiving ongoing that. And alas, it looks like this did not preserve the reasons why, so I'm going to have to supplement. But this is useful to us for a few reasons. Firstly, this is a long-running game in many ways, or variations of it. It allows us to it shows AI acting in a single field, namely StarCraft-like control of units with pathing and so on. We're not seeing drastic changes in that. It's not being asked to compose Shakespeare or help a university student cheat on their exam. Secondly, this is a long-running game. It is almost as old as I am, and many others, and it has been iterated on from a basically consistent memory. Thirdly, it's not subject to a high level of trade secrecy or classified information. You're not going to get an all-expense-paid trip to a certain part of Cuba for this. there is a very large community of modders and gamers and so on looking over this, which gives us a great deal of examination, which is important for replication and testing, especially now that we have a general replication crisis. And finally, on the point I'm going to touch on now, we have there's the fact that it has been hugely influential in other aspects of that, and this testing field allows us to see testing and replication in very fine detail with exact tailored to the pixel fields, and that's why I chose to choose this here, as well as my personal bias. I think this is where I stop for questions.
Yeah, guys, can you hear me? I don't know if my mic is working here. Can you guys hear me? I don't think so.
I think we're probably good. This has just been a nice, good, broad overview. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide?
Let us.
No, Gene, we cannot hear you, sadly.
Wait a second, Dan. Wait a second.
You can't hear me? That's working.
What about now? Is it working?
Sorry, Gene. Also, I'd like to address point to the now, what makes this useful is that they've actually retained broad compatibility between the AI models and the releases we have had. And it seems like the right side of my slide disappeared, which is a problem, but we move on. And for the purposes of this, they have retained three. The first is the CD AI, what is called. It's from the last mainline release of the original version of the game, from the Conquerors expansion of Age of Kings, released in 2000. And it was the original and sort of a throwback to the past in many forms, including cheating more than Bernie Madoff, as well as a similar economic track record. The second, and the one that was released with the HD, the 2015, is called HD AI, and this was remarkable because it shows a great deal of how things have changed. For starters, they either removed or minimized the cheating. I've heard conflicting interpretations of that. Secondly, it is generally much smarter, in part, which is one reason they felt comfortable removing the cheating. And it is generally a very aggressive opponent, almost to a fault. And it is generally performed very well. Finally, we have what the latest version of the game, the definitive edition, simply calls AI. Very helpfully, of course. For the purposes of clarification, I am calling it the definitive edition, or DEAI, to represent that as when it was instituted. And this is remarkable because it very closely mimics what is considered peak human meta gaming in there and strategies. And why it's exciting that a new AI model is spying with sheep is another thing. Now, I wish I could touch on this more in depth, but I only had so much time to speak, and the slide seems to have had issues, or rather, it is not awesome enough to hold my awesome presentation. But that gives you an idea. This was a test run by one of the major ones, with the blue being AI, the red being the the blue being the DEAI, the red being the HEAI, and the pink being the original. And there's a lot to get into here from a bunch of testing, so the best I can do is distill some general points. And the first is that this is a fairly simple system purpose to do a thing, and surprisingly, that is not always to win matches, though that is helpful. And indeed, for most difficulty levels, the AI will actually hobble itself into inferior playing styles, in part because, like the WWE, its job is to be entertaining. It is not necessarily trying to be deep blue and going for the win. Secondly, it's important to note that this is, to a large degree, still human-driven. We are not quite at the point of machines making machines there. The major forks of this AI were largely player-driven and often that. Thirdly, it's important to note how rather rapidly things went. One of the promo events, I believe, back in 2015 was the Microsoft pitting 3 of the old school Conqueror style AIs from 2000 or so against one from the HE. And along with the accompanying cheats, the HE AI whipped them good, in spite of being outnumbered and outspent. And that is one reason why there's not too much analysis of the Conqueror relative to the two. The fourth point, and this is kind of interesting and shows that there's not always linear progression, is below a certain difficulty threshold, I believe it is extreme, the HEAI actually tends to win one-on-one against the definitive edition AI. Why this is subject to some dispute, but it includes some things like the definitive edition AI focusing more on economic production, while the HEAI tends to focus more on relatively skilled attacking. And so below this difficulty threshold, the constant aggression and burning things down of the definitive of the HEAI tends to prevail. But above that difficulty threshold, the superior computing power and economic micromanaging of the definitive edition tends to win. And I think this indicates that we can't always assume that we will see a line go up in a curve straight thing. There will be adjustment, and many of these will be human. Indeed, there's been a fan project to improve the DEAI called the so-called Barbarian definitive edition AI, which is much more aggressive, but also typically tends to include DE's smarts, and it has thoroughly trounced the HEAI in most testing. And the reason I go into this detail here is because I think it gives us a useful benchmark on how this has evolved in a fairly finite field that we can measure from that over the course of 20-some years. And that is a useful benchmark that will tie into much of what Ella is up. Now, Paul, I imagine this is where I take questions and go over.
Let me see. Is my mic working now, guys? I'm sorry.
Yes, you are.
Oh, finally. I'm sorry, everyone. So basically, connection issues here. Yeah, I wanted to just introduce in the beginning. I thought I was speaking, but no worries. What do you guys prefer, Elodine, Turtler? Would you prefer answering questions before each slide moves on, or just doing a general Q&A question overall? Because then if someone has questions and want to speak, they need to come here to the speaker stage. It's up to you guys. But if someone has any questions or want to speak anything about so far, just request you speak and we can have you here on the stage. And yeah, thank you. Sorry about the inconvenience of the technical issues.
So I'll largely defer to Elodine, but I could also take any extra questions if someone remembers on, say, DM or that later. Whatever works for Elodie and the rest of you.
Yeah,
So what do you think?
it's been great getting some questions in the app, but absolutely in between slides, we'll definitely have anybody come on stage and ask questions so we can introduce a little bit of discussion if you'd like. That would be fantastic.
Awesome. Agreed. So just request to speak if you have any questions, and we can have you here on the speaker stage. But yeah, for now you can move on, Elodie. And I think like eventually, if someone requests, we can have him on board and just come here.
Wonderful. All right. So I think what Turtler brings up is a great way for us to display how AI has actually been helping out with games forever, since like the dinosaur days. It's just been getting more complex and more sophisticated as time goes on. And that sort of brings us into another big topic that we need to get into today, and that's development cycles. It used to be, and you can still see this in many games today, but not as many as it used to. A development cycle had a definitive start and it had a definitive end. And what we've seen in the gaming industry over the last 20 years or so is this elongation of the development cycle, where things are perpetually stuck in development, even after release, even after stabilization. One of the biggest influences in this has been the popularization of both gacha and microtransaction games. They really feed this model exceptionally well. And unfortunately, we also see even really stable services like Discord give into this new perpetual development cycle, where even though the app has worked great, never needed a facelift in 15 years, they go ahead and decide to change things to cater to people who will go ahead and pay monthly for Discord Nitro versus the individual users that have sort of built up the app over the years. And that is a perfectly fair business model. People are welcome to do it. It's the overpopularization of this business model that has sort of drowned out the industry in cycles that just drag on forever. Earlier, we talked about StarCraft 2, and this was a great example of a game that got stuck in an endless development cycle. And players didn't notice that because players never saw an extra day's wait. What they saw instead was the developers having to pull overtime every single week. And it wasn't because the game suddenly had more to do. It's because of this new approach to the development cycle that I want to go ahead and touch on. There are a couple different ways that you can go ahead and approach game design development. You can go ahead and essentially locally build your application, launch and test it, and then start to go ahead and convert to whatever specific platform, and that's basically your fine-tuning stage. It's very straightforward. Indie developers don't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of doing that because you have to be able to show as much of a working product as you possibly can along the way. So the approach that AAA studios have right now is they build a feature, they test it, they troubleshoot all of the bugs in it, and then they add those bricks in one by one. The problem is those bricks don't always fit together when they're troubleshot. And instead what happens is by the time you start putting those things together, you now have to go back and fix 20 more problems that you wouldn't have had to fix if you had just built the system laterally. So what does this mean for game development? Well, everybody here has basically seen what it means for game development. It means there are some AAA studios shutting down. It means that there are some places that make sure that their microtransactions prop up the game, you know, a skin. I think that since we're on StarCraft 2, there have been skins in the Blizzard shop, individual pets and items. So just graphic blocks at that point, skins, and small rigs that individually probably take hours to develop, a couple days, a week at best, to go ahead and pull in more than the entirety of StarCraft 2. And this is the reason that perpetual development cycles are so appealing to AAA studios right now. It's why they'll continue to pump out this content forever. Indie studios can't do that. We have to go ahead and develop a product, get it shown to the world. It has to be usable. It has to be functional. It has to be troubleshot. We don't have the luxury of delaying things or putting out a product in completion. Say it's not in beta anymore, it's in public release. That is buggy to all hell and back, and then we have to spend 3 months fixing it. That doesn't do us any good with the public. So unfortunately, there's this vast difference in what you'll see from an indie developer as they approach things versus a AAA studio, because there's a different gain at the end of them. There's a different goal to the process. And so endless development benefits people who have money to spend. It does not behoove individuals who are trying to build a portfolio. So if we have any questions on development cycles and sort of really how they've died out over the last few years, I'd be happy to go ahead and take any now.
That would be super awesome. Also, like from the speakers, Ray, Matthew, if you guys got any questions, feel free to join. I see here that Dustin wants to speak, so I just allowed you to come here in the speaking stage. Dustin, feel free to join us and ask your questions, friend. Just let me know if it is available for you, but I see him.
It's
Hello, can you
definitely
hear me?
so exciting to see all the game development which is going on.
I can hear
Like
you.
AAA studios have a different pathway, and indie game developers have a different pathway. But the end result of both of them is the same, which is the game has to be playable and to be loved by everyone. So that's a very important thing.
Yes, Ray, agreed. Also,
Right.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just agreeing. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. All right. Also, Dustin, feel free to ask your questions, friend.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Hey.
Absolutely.
hi.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I'm not an AI developer, but I like to integrate AI stuff. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. I'm also dealing with different conceptual projects. So please excuse me if I don't have the terminology or the lingo, professional lingo, whatever. I might struggle a little bit. But what does it mean to develop laterally?
All right. So lateral development. Let's talk about what lateral thinking is first. It's a pretty common thing that happens. Lateral thinking is when two people develop a similar idea along the same time independently of each other. So two people who have never met have the same idea for a trading card game based on XYZ, right? They may not be talking to each other, they may not be in the same sphere, but maybe they were influenced by something similar and they both have the same idea that they put forward. So when we talk about lateral development, what we see a lot of times is people who are working on the same thing at the same time independently of each other. Sometimes that is an indie studio who is making something comparable to a AAA studio. Sometimes that it also happens within AAA studios where people will essentially be working on the same aspect of the same project completely independently of each other. Sometimes that's done for creative reasons. Other times that is done for, again, this weird development cycle we have where you're trying to make individual functions work by themselves and then build individual functions together. So sometimes what ends up happening is developers have to make placeholder functions or individual items that may not necessarily be what somebody else is working on, but has to be laterally thought out and planned out as they're sort of making that framework and scaffolding. So it's kind of like when you're coding an application and sometimes you have to go ahead and slot in something temporary. You may not need to discuss what that temporary XYZ is with somebody, but that is a way that lateral development happens. And also the way where you come across some really neat applications of these different game mechanics, right? Because that's when you get out kind of the math and the back end that somebody has to look at more than the final product or even just the individual function. They have to see how it interacts with everything down the chain.
So it's not only just the micro, it's also scales to the macro. And when it comes to development, hyper individualistic, but because of the individuals, two or more, are scaling, are developing, there may be some miscommunication, miscollaborating, maybe that's the word, like they're collaborating, either they could be collaborating or they could not, depending on the situation, and they're just it's not quite collaborating in the same direction, maybe. So yeah, that's something I'm actually, believe it or not, that's something I'm actually developing right now, and on paper, not as a developer, but just like, hey, here's the concept. So yeah, it's let's see here. So what would be a challenge to help the indie developers to scale to the big time AAA guys? You know, what would be certain things in your expertise, or maybe on the outskirts of your knowledge, to help with that scaling problem? That's how I'm interpreting it, where you got this work done, trying to make the profile, here's an indie developer. I'm trying to look at like a platform as a service or a software as a service, infrastructure as code, you know, maybe a data center type thing. How is my business, you know, work, my work go in that direction, where how do I help the indie guy scale? You know, here's a new platform assisted with AI or autonomously made with AI, so that AI will guide the user.
So this is a great question. Scalability for indie developers. A lot of that boils down to hosting and processing power, the same thing that we kind of face with AI, right? So for instance, right now, one of the challenges that our studio is facing is we are developing a music bot, and that is an interactive AI radio host alongside a Discord trading card game. These are fun, novel bot concept ideas. They're great and prime for monetization between microtransactions and a trading card game, and then a premium feature on an AI DJ host, right? The problem that we run into, though, is that a lot of these, I can't host 75 different versions of the AI radio host that I would need to go ahead and get into Discord's monetization program. As an independent developer, the virtual machine that I would need to go ahead and run monthly to put out for that would just be too large. I'd have to give away the product for free. I'd have to make an investment into it for a few months. In the effort of complete transparency, TTI, for example, and I'm going to go ahead and paste a link to it in the chat so you guys can kind of see what the actual game looks like that we're going to be talking about here in just a moment. If you go here, this is the front landing page, and you can go ahead and just click on the Play GPT version if you'd like. But, oh my God, what was I talking about? I'm sorry, my brain just flatlined there for a second.
Breathe. It was excitement. I've done that before. You were saying here's the TTI something, and then you were talking about the scaling issues with your program. Said 75 versions of it. I'm guessing that 75 GitHub, versionings of the base model, or some other like that's it.
Flat instances. It's a lot. So that, for instance,
Google instances. Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
we're talking about like individual virtual machines or a very large machine. Either way,
Oh,
it's
okay.
expensive. So one of the things that I could do is go ahead and distribute it for free, but at that point, right, that I've distributed it for free, and then people need to go ahead and host it locally. So there are lots of different roadblocks to development right now, and a lot of it is
Hmm.
just monetization. So that's where I was going. So Tenebros Tales Interactive. Right now, this site brings in 10,000 individual unique monthly users. This site costs me $40 a month to run and costs me less than $1,200 to develop for the last year. Incredibly cheap in terms of its development
Ooh.
cycle for the number of people that play it, right? I can't do that with the Discord bot. I can't do that with the TCG game. I will never go ahead and make those numbers over again for those amount of players or interaction. It's not possible with just the amount of hardware. Now, TTI works with this model because there is one HTML page that runs everything, and I don't collect any data. The user stores all their data. So there's no host burdening on me. It makes things incredibly easy to go ahead and appeal to a user base because not only do we have data security, because we don't handle any of the data, we're only a middleman, but we also drop off our operating costs significantly as a result of just being able to have people basically be their own instance.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm a big proponent, ideologically, maybe not in realistic terms. Ideologic optimism, like, hey, let's collect all the data and store it somewhere, and then later we can use that. Let it collect for a while. So, whew, that's what would be the operating cost? Would you suggest in that example you've brought up for this game, to collect such a data? The reason why is, you actually deployed it. What would be you said the operational man, you're talking in a CFO type of role, so chief financial officer for those that don't know. What would be the cost of doing business? Because, it's nice to
So,
be doing, it's nice to
so
do things we love, but can we afford it,
right. So this is where, and again, just being fully transparent, this is where Tenebros Tales differs from a lot of the different front ends that you'll use for chatbot sites because they're geared towards the monetization process in terms of monthly subscriptions, or alternatively, they're geared towards a number of free set messages per day to go ahead and aggregate data for sales. And neither of those are necessarily appealing in the long run. It's especially for an indie studio, they're great on the surface. Users really enjoy them. People have a fun time getting free messages in, right? The problem comes from once the data is sold, you never end up knowing where else it ends up going. And that kind of is a problem that is pervasive in indie development. So, in terms of cost, what would it cost to go ahead and make it so that we could aggregate user data to go ahead and either collect it for fine tuning a model or sales? Doesn't really matter either way.
both. In my case, it would be both, and then use the data
Yeah.
for marketing. We're talking like if it was a big company, because the data. Here's a cheap business, but here's the data. Get to know the market. All the big, the large company aspects, even medium company aspects of running a business, so that way it could scale. Even though it's a small game, small web server, small whatever you've set it up. How do we scale? How do we know our customer better? Because knowing our customer better, is one of the core pillars of any business. So don't alienate. So don't alienate the core customers in the market you're making. So, and that's. I'm sorry, I'm saying that as a projecting. Sorry, but it's still, how do you make those changes without being inflammatory to your customers? and he's like, screw this, I've been here 10 years, blah, blah, blah. You know, so how do we use the data for the end goal of growing the business?
Right.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead,
So-
Turtler.
For one, I think one thing we have to be careful of is we might be conflating a few things in terms of scalability that aren't actually scalability. And one thing that and one of the things I did that actually resulted in me fisking Einstein posthumously was we tend to focus on economy of scales as we should because they have many benefits, but we tend to overstate them. For instance, at the turn of the last century, there was a lot of assumption that the largest organizations you could get were most efficient and that efficiency would scale forever or more or less. That's not how it happened, and we probably should have known better from the start because there are benefits to scalability, but there are also costs. And in computing, I think one of the key things is computing power, but one of the benefits smaller studios have in terms of that is reactivity. They can operate often with a lower threshold. For instance, not to toot my own horn, but Elodine, for instance, is one of the hardest working people I know, and she can largely set her hours through that. And in my case, I helped go to where I am in part because I know a bunch of friends from gaming or reenacting. I went around and I was saying, hey, would you want to come in? You know X or Y or Z. Would you be willing to come in and help with this, answer questions for me in this sort of interview room with Elodine taking notes? And this is not going to put Microsoft out of business any day, but it might put a lot of their consultants out of business because it allows greater flexibility. And secondly, I think one of the problems is how scalability is going to be defined as things go, and particularly as computing power expands. We already talked about how this has gone on for there, and how we'll handle the ideological questions you mentioned, such as who stores the data. And part of the thing is the markets and people are going to adapt to something, so we probably want to keep our heads on a swivel to see how business models grow. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, and this is where
no. This is awesome because
yeah.
this is so awesome because scale is always a problem in any business, in any industry, and that's something I want to come in that direction. If we're not ready, that's fine. But it's like, hey, because scale is a problem for individuals, as you mentioned, Mrs. T, and so not T. So it's like, how do I, as a researcher in this hat, a solution manager in this, the other hat, how to write down what is the best way to go for scale? How could I be the platform to help others, to get their goals done? So, yeah.
The biggest thing is hosting space. And the other thing is what's called zero trust models. They're very popular in the military right now. Zero trust is exactly what it sounds like. It's essentially made so that only individuals who need security components have security components. This keeps data really safe. If we're talking about novel use for AI, I will be the first person to say, as we're getting into the actual development of TTI now and how games are actively leveraging this kind of stuff, I will say, if your game has any free use of AI. And what I mean by free use is, can you go ahead and ask the AI for a textual or audio output that doesn't have a direct sensor from you, not from the AI company, from you. unless you have that, you need to go ahead and understand that the things that you're aggregating, you may in fact end up becoming an obligated reporter depending on where you live. The good and the bad side of AI is the fact that it allows for a lot of creativity, but it allows for a lot of creativity, and there are bad actors in the field. And when you open yourself up to obtain data, you open yourself up to obtaining data.
What was that last part? Something data, something.
When you open yourself up to harvesting data, you have to take on the responsibilities that come with harvesting data. And sometimes that doesn't always just mean being able to scale up an operation. Sometimes it means having to deal with lawyers and understanding that somebody may be using your platform for nefarious needs, which, by the way, our platform, TTI, has been used multiple times in part of bot networks to go ahead and DDoS applications that use API access. That's just a thing. I can't get around that. I can't stop people from doing that. It's not something I have control over as a middleman, but it's something that happens. And it's something that if somebody wanted to come after me for, I would potentially have to answer for. OAI would potentially have to answer for, seeing as they're the middleman that aggregates the actual production power of these bots.
It's nice to have optimism, but we need to have some realism to what could happen, what has happened, and predict possibly what for those bad actors, and write the code and filters and, you know, the templates for those bad actors if they show up. It's a numbers game. So
yeah,
it's nice to make some money, but then again, how much that lawyer gonna cost? Oof.
Exactly. And that'll bring us into a nice segue regarding cheating, and then our next slide. So if you want to talk about bad actors, realistically, in this space, I am what would be defined as a bad actor. I am not somebody who's going to get along with most AI ethicists outside of Kate. She's wonderful. I should have started off this discussion discussing how Yuval Harari and Steven Pinker sat down and had a discussion regarding AI. These two guys sat and talked about and made a lovely point about how our philosophy, quite frankly, is still stuck where it was hundreds of years ago. And we do not have the ability to evolve as quickly in our thinking as our technology has evolved. The result of that is that we are applying decades old philosophy to new burgeoning technology that we don't fully understand. And this is kind of a problematic subject to some extent. So let's go ahead and talk about cheating and gaming, bad actors, AI, and where we come into play with this. So cheating in games is pretty relevant. It's happened as long as there's been somebody who wanted to go ahead and exploit infinite money in anything, right? So what has happened is the same thing that you see in a cyber warfare space, and that is it's basically a fight. So each side is aggregating data on how to attack the other, and then another side responds either with a detection or a workaround. If you are running a hack that is an aimbot and you go ahead and manage to zero in on a target through automation using some kind of color flagging system, right? Well, what'll happen is the studio will figure that out. They'll realize what you're doing. They won't do anything about it. They won't do anything about it for a good 5-6 months or so. So while everybody is sitting here screaming that the game development studio isn't doing anything about the hackers, what they're doing is they're allowing the hackers to go ahead and change things just enough so that when the ban wave finally comes through, not only do they catch a lot of the people who are using it, but the people who have implemented this mod, this hack or whatever, don't know necessarily what triggered it. So they then have to spend months dissecting exactly what got everybody's accounts banned, and what detection was made. So when they realized that the change that the studio made was to go ahead and ban everybody using that hack, and then go ahead and change the color palette on a skin so that couldn't be done anymore. Things like this are just, they're simple back and forth. They happen all the time. And it is something that you see not just in gaming, but in almost every aspect of tech and cybersecurity. There are literally people out there whose entire job it is to go ahead and find exploits in code and send it into people. I am one of those assholes with AI. I am one of those bad actors. My first job in this industry was prompt and code injection into a site that I won't name that was dumb enough to leave it so that you could essentially fully modify the site through the text input. They didn't disable that as a code box or anything like that. So I could just go ahead and use everything from Python to JavaScript to HTML, C++, anything I could put into that site. It was a huge security exploit at the time. It ended up getting patched like less than 48 hours later because of the security flaw it provided. But you'll see a lot of those things. It really just depends on how big the flaw is. And that brings us into pseudocode. This is essentially not only what every bad actor is going to use, it is also what every good actor is going to use. If you open up the TTI site and you look at any character card, what you're going to see is kind of what looks to be a mess of YAML, markdown, underscores, and a bunch of quotation marks. And at first, it looks really janky. But what you end up seeing with pseudocode is these individual sections that are parsed out for the AI to go ahead and identify, localize, and then isolate the specific parts it's trying to look for when it responds to you. So if you want a character bot to act like a character, pseudocode is a great way to go ahead and define new guide rails for that AI. You can go ahead and go through any kind of system and make just about any bot. This is not relegated towards characters specifically. So let's say, I'll use one of my favorite bots, for instance. Let's say you want to go ahead and make a bot that is a stock aggregate. You could go ahead and fine-tune a model for it. That's fine. But you will have more success taking a fine-tuned model and overlaying a correct pseudocode prompt on top of that as guidance to go ahead and get an output. So what does a stock bot do? It was really simple. We went ahead and took a bot. We went ahead and gave it access to an RSS feed that aggregated headlines and important data points about livestock options. And then we went ahead and had the bot give an overview once daily to that livestock RSS feed, and then give us a suggestion for investment or divestment on our portfolio. That is not something that can necessarily be done natively in ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't like giving financial advice, especially with the stock market and investments. We also use this exploit to go ahead and show how you could go ahead and, though it's been patched now, you could pull personal identifying information about non-public figures from GPT. That was just data they had aggregated in their backend. And pseudocode allows us to see a lot of things that developers would not normally want us to see. It allows us to see not only the data that's been aggregated, but the potential of what can be pulled out of that data. Pseudocode helps adjust what we call weights. Weights in AI are exactly what you think of. It's how much potency a word or string or a token has in general. Pseudocode allows us to essentially destroy the weights of whatever system we're working with and implement our own through a little bit of synonyms and heavy syntax. So we can do things with pseudocode that we could not normally do. For instance, in the game, our villain is a DHS agent. So he's a dude who works for the government. His name is Hoster. He is supposed to be a stand-in for Lovecraft's Hoster, who was a very familiar villain to the Cthulhu mythos years ago. But if I direct the AI to Hoster, the AI wants to reference Lovecraft's Hoster. So how I have to use pseudocode as a way to wiggle around that weight and define that this is a new training data area. This isn't something that you've used. Code allows us to manipulate areas of data that we wouldn't normally have access to and can normally provide us a lot of trouble with prompts. It's also where we get into RPA. So if we have any questions regarding pseudocode, I'll go ahead and take them now, and then we'll go ahead and get into how pseudocode is leveraged to do robotic processing automation.
Yes, guys, just feel free to solicit
And no,
to speak.
I did not get a good bounty for discovering that exploit. That was definitely back in what I would consider gray hat days.
Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, just please raise your hands and we can have you here on the speaker stage. And yeah. But I think you can get going, Elodyne, so yeah, no worries.
Absolutely. Okay. So I want to go ahead and get you that paper on pseudocode. I have it somewhere in here. Hang on just one moment. I'm so sorry. Pseudocode is great. It is not just like a point of conjecture. It's not something that I'm just randomly talking about. This is something that has actively been confirmed by Microsoft. This is just something that that is, and it's not. I should clarify and say that it's not for every model. For instance, if you are using Novel AI, don't use pseudocode. You can use it for just about every other model, and the reason for that is pretty simple. It's because there's a difference between a text generative and a text completion model. So a text completion model wants to take the text you have and end it. We use what's called text generative models. It wants to take your input and it wants to continue it. It doesn't want you to go ahead and end something. So these different styles of models tend to favor different inputs. Novel AI is the only one that I know of that pulls away from the ability to use pseudocode. Every other model that I've used is very friendly to this method. There we go. There's that link. All right. So pseudocode, RPA, man, this is my favorite thing. So we touched just a little bit on this before, but man, RPA is amazing. RPA is robotic processing automation. It's what a lot of people are going to use now to go ahead and help customize things for individuals. It's also going to be what helps new people coming into the tech space. It's going to be what helps them learn how to code, quite frankly. So RPA, leveraging it, do is we go ahead and take a bot. We line it up with this pseudocode. We give it all the prompts and the guidance it needs. So for instance, we'll start out with a really basic example. And all of these I've actually used and put in to Tenebros Tales Interactive. They are nearly the entire site is built with AI. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that even our databases are managed by AI. If I want to go ahead and make a Quest database, I have to go ahead and decide a format. Let's say I decide I want an XML format. That's great. It's really simple, easy language to read, and I can go ahead and set things up so that it adjusts the quests based on context and updates them from the XML database. Now I have to populate that database, and quite frankly, that's the most time-consuming thing. But that's the thing that the users get the most benefit out of. The users don't care about anything that came before that database. They care about what's in that database. They care about the number of quests, the amount of content, how much is available for them to do and play and is accessible at any given time. So what do we use RPA to do? Well, we use RPA to go ahead and set up a bot whose entire point in pseudocode is to go ahead and generate database friendly quests. So quests that are already formatted in XML for us, so that all we have to do is push that code to the database. Do we like that? Does it meet the quality check? Is that a nice quest that people would enjoy? Does it feel in character? Yes. Did we have to think about it at all? No. Did it take 5 seconds to go ahead and generate? It did. And it only took us about an hour to set up. And then suddenly we're doing the job of multiple people. We are the writer, we are the content designer, we are the database manager, and we're doing it all from a single bot that is producing tons of content for us. The same thing goes for art. You know, you can use these sorts of fine-tuned models not just to define the art in your game. I mean, our avatars are great. They came from a really nice AI model. But you know what else on the site is all designed by AI? All of our icons are designed by AI. Our banners are designed by AI. Our logos are designed by AI. None of that I had to pay out of pocket for. It's how we kept the cost below $1,300 for an entire year of production. This is how new indie studios are going to be born and made, because they're not going to have the financial obligation for fundraising that once stood in their way. It's going to benefit content design. It's going to benefit the overall asset generation of the site. And it's also going to provide users what we call low code and no code solutions. This is something I've also implemented in the site to both its benefit and the detriment. We talked earlier about how the site has been leveraged before for botnet attacks. Well, the reason that it can do that is because it has a section for a character that is a custom code box. And that allows people to do things that are really fun. I can go ahead and use that custom code box to make visual novels for people that are free to go ahead and introduce them to the concept of the site. So if you go to the site and you click on the GPT button, you can go ahead and check out Copper Road for free without needing an API key. And it basically works as a little visual novel where you're just progressing through each text block. It's really cool, really fun, really neat little thing. You can even add in visual effects and stuff like that. So players can go ahead and leverage these kinds of things to do things like change their text colors. Or, you know, they want background music that changes depending on the mood of the game. Or realistically, what they want is they want in a voice to be hooked up text to speech and narrate to them. And they can do all of that. There's so much that you can do with these no code and low code solutions. And sometimes all it takes is doing a bit of work for the player base for them to really enjoy the output. We as developers see the benefit of low and no code solutions through things like UiPath, which is a tool that a lot of individuals are using. Specifically, if you look at this slide, you're going to notice a link that says robotforeveryairman.net. This is really important. This is a program that the U.S. Air Force is running to go ahead and basically leverage bots for everyday tasks. Really simple things, right? But it's what they're doing with RPA right now. And it's something that's just spread across the landscape. Everybody wants to capitalize on RPA because it takes away the menial generation that keeps people from getting the important tasks done. UiPath is used by the US government and a ton of other large corporations. It's what we call a low or no code solution because people can go ahead and use it without needing to know JavaScript or React frameworks or Python or anything else that comes in between. It doesn't matter. Salesforce also is working on low and no code solutions. But you know what else is a great low and no code solution? AI. AI does low and no code at any point. It'll take plain text just fine. It'll take pseudocode just fine. Or hell, you could use Python to go ahead and guide its every action if you really got that stick up your ass. The point is that RPA, there's almost no limit as to how you can go ahead and implement it. It is useful for almost anything and everything that you could go ahead and imagine. And people are using it every day now to go ahead and enhance the experiences of their applications. As far as Dustin, I think you asked the question, can I use this with AutoGen and ChatDev? If those use any kind of like TextGen API endpoint, I wouldn't see why not. That would be, unless you're, I'm trying to think of how to put it. So RPA will work with every AI, again, with the exception being novel AI because of the way it's set up. So as long as your models use any kind of framework that is similar to a ChatGPT, a Llama, a Bard, anything like that, you'll be good to use RPA on that. And I'll turn it over for questions on RPA now before we get into the next slide.
I guess everything is pretty clear so far. Guys, if you have anything, you can write in the chat as well if you don't fancy like speaking or so. But yeah, I mean, everything is going perfect. I'm really enjoying it.
Wonderful. I'm glad you guys are having a good time. All right. So
I do have a question.
Yes, absolutely, Dustin.
So, what was it? You were talking about the military. So, could the military use AI for simulations? Using, like use a game, I don't know, just kind of like a flow of conscience. I just not filtered. So, here's a game,
Military
you build
already
it.
uses procedural generated games for testing that involve AI. That's not a new thing to them. They do that for both pilot programs and then security forces training on certain bases, depending on how much funding they have, where they'll go ahead and simulate dangerous scenarios with what is essentially a game engine to go ahead and ensure safety. No live ammo.
Yeah. Okay, that's so. I was having this concept for some time, and that was something like maybe I can get a defense contract to do that for them, but is that something I want to really deal with? But
so
the
if you're
concept's nice to
interested
know.
in contracts, your best bet is so one, USAF, they have the biggest funding for bot and AI programs, and then you want to go ahead and hit up their yearly bot conference, DFIDIC. It's where basically every tech company shows off what they can do. I mean, every tech company is there. Google is there. IBM is there. Salesforce is there. And every small company that exists, GitHub is there, for fuck's sake. There is not a company that exists that wants to get government attention that doesn't go to DFIDIC.
Oh man, miss, that's so when you say there was such enthusiasm, like I am guessing it's just A to Z. If they can want to make some money, they have an idea. If they're in it for the art and the fun, they're there. I'm guessing, huh?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh.
I talked to some people there last year whose devs did everything from I talked to one dev who was using I felt so bad for him. He was using GPT to go ahead and automate security flags, so determining whether or not logins were suspicious and basically flagging them red or green and sorting them into piles. And I had to ask him, and this is where things get hard. If you go into these spaces, you're going to be asked hard questions. And he was asked, how do you account for the real life haptic feedback of a model that will eventually degrade if you're using it as a security product? Because then the security degrades over time. Your product will never be as safe as it is until a new model is implemented. That's a problem. He did not have an answer for that. And that's okay. the part of this is that we're in new territory. Not everybody's going to have an answer. Not everybody's going to have a good workaround. Sometimes part of what we're doing is developing ways that we can stop things like real life haptic feedback.
That's a very valid point. I think that's one of the core issues. And I'm going to throw this out there. I think we should have some kind of community think tank. In this community, on a big, global scale as well as the micro, just like here in the small local community type of thing, and see how we could be innovative, forward thinking, like, hey, what's in the future? What are the possibilities we can deal with? As you're talking, I'm thinking, how about we make a new model called regenerative thinking? Just that's what it's titled. And then the idea is that it's given the data, it's given its semi-autonomy, because, people are afraid of fully autonomous, but give it semi-autonomy. So things like it's like a 16-year-old kid has an intelligence of 150, and it can do a whole bunch of stuff. Works like an Amish child. So, and it's pretty virtuous. So that's kind of like, right now I'm thinking now, it's kind of one of my specialties. So somehow tell it, hey, here's the security stuff. And when the model does degrade, it flags itself. Here's... I'm trying to
Yeah,
think
so you touch on an interesting thing. What you're basically talking about is using AI to monitor AI, and this is an interesting concept, especially if you are familiar with the black box at all. So when you feed an input into the AI, it feeds everything through a black box. And what the black box is doing is essentially it's performing these straight line and these curved equations, basically alternating them between flat lines and curved surfaces, and it's squashing data until it is readable. And then it is able to determine an output, right? We can use tools to essentially look into the black box, and we can use tools to monitor the black box. Those are two kind of different things. One is invasive and one sits on top. And we know that when we look into the black box of an AI model, we degrade the outputs. Just putting something on top of it, interfering with it at all, trying to peek inside is not something that is friendly or intuitive to these models, and is something to really keep in mind. Now, you can do what services like GPT, Character AI, and I think Anthropic have done as well, where you're layering another AI on top of it. We talked about a security system earlier that took inputs and used red and green flags, right? You can essentially do the same thing with a lower grade AI model that would be a micro model, settle it over on top of everything. And you can essentially use that to determine whether or not an output is degraded. Baseline testing is so important to set up if you are going to do RPA or any kind of bot management at all. And baseline testing is very simple. You find what the bot is trying to accomplish. You set up a non-negotiable prompt. You ensure that it is adhering to that prompt and that the output is satisfactory. And if it looks like that output is degrading, that is natural to some extent because the AI can never give you the same response twice. So it's always going to be reaching. But if you are consistently getting bad outputs from your baseline, then the overall bot or model needs to be adjusted. This is again where pseudocode comes into play, because you can use pseudocode to get around degraded weights, terms, and lines of thinking in the AI by implementing new strings that it needs to adhere to that are not inherent in its training data. Pseudocode is the way that we, at least temporarily, elongate the lifeline of these models.
How long were you talking about elongating in a realistic aspect? And the most pessimistic, when it's dead, it's got to be redone.
Correct. And I think this is this is a really good place to launch us into. We've got two more slides. This one more. We can kind of talk about the dual impact of AI in gaming. And it's not just the gaming industry. The stuff I'm about to talk about happens everywhere. So one of the things that we're seeing that I'm going to get through some of these points, but we see smaller development cycles, right? TTI was a very ambitious project. It is a series of interconnected chatbots that are designed and tailored to your unique output. It's a sandbox game with endless adventures and almost 24 unique characters, right? It took one person less than a year to go ahead and put together, and not just one person. This is where the fun reveals of the PowerPoint come in. It took one person with no coding experience whatsoever. I've never touched a piece of code in my life before this project. I am now fluent in multiple coding languages and make these bots and programs and everything else that you could possibly imagine. So AI is really potent for enhancing a development cycle, for giving somebody the ability to leverage knowledge that they wouldn't normally have access to. That is a great benefit to the system. And as a result, that means more indie studios. There's a lower barrier of entry. You don't need to have fancy degrees to get going. You don't have to sit in a class for 8 hours to go ahead and start learning how to go ahead and put together a chat bot or send a fetch request. You can go ahead and talk to an AI and run things out of a secure shell in your computer, right? It's just so much easier to get into. It's so much more accessible. And to be quite frank, it offers a space, AI does, where you don't have to worry about people watching you. If I sit there and I fuck up coding a bot for 4 hours, I don't have to do that at a class. I don't have to have a deadline over me. I get to sit and I get to figure it out at my own pace. And when it works, it works. And then I keep a big book of nothing but important code blocks that I can go ahead and reference later on that are good for different aspects of development. So those are some great benefits, right? AI. Oh, real quick. Good night, Em. You have a good sleep. I totally understand. It's getting late. But let's talk about the downside of AI in gaming. It certainly has a negative impact, and one we're already seeing. We can go ahead and see these new projects, Vaudeville coming out, these Skyrim mods that are expansive, that are including ChatGPT and 11 Labs. Even my own site, and it's really awesome and it's really fun to see, but we are facing the immediate backlash in the industry. And as much as the art industry wants to go ahead and rail on AI as something that is going to take their jobs, right? The tech industry is a proponent of AI and knows it's going to take their jobs. We are already suffering from that. So there are less jobs in the tech industry now, despite the fact that we are seeing this boom in this sort of tech boom in AI. And the reason for that is that our entry-level jobs are disappearing. You're not going to see a job for an XML database manager because you can go ahead and hire a bot off for that for $20 a month at absolute most. It's ridiculous the amount of jobs that sort of fall into this category. You don't need junior web developers anymore. These entry-level jobs are superfluous at best. They've been replaced with prompt engineering jobs and jobs that will go ahead and automate these different workflows instead. And not everybody is geared for that. For instance, this week, I had somebody come to me and say, hey, I have got this bot and it is for a healthcare database and it doesn't adhere to my prompts. And I said, no problem, let's go ahead and implement a pseudocode solution. It worked. The pseudocode was great. Their bot is up and running. Everything is going smoothly. And then I come to find out the man who asked me for help, bless his heart, he has a business degree in economics. He He doesn't work with bots or AI. He was just given this job as a prompt engineer because he had a degree. It's important to note that like the tech industry really right now, a lot of these big companies, they pride degrees, period dot. Doesn't matter what that degree is in, doesn't almost matter what you're doing. They pride degrees and certifications. You have to hit that check mark. So as much as I'm sitting here being an advocate of indie development and learning yourself and things like that, take it from the high school dropout who had no coding experience up until this year, does not have any college degrees, but has an indie studio that sees 10,000 people a month. I can't get a job in the tech industry right now. I'm sitting here talking to you as a developer, as somebody who has gone to fucking MIT and sat in classes and listened to professors spout off about things that they could only dream about that now we're implementing live on our site, who is laterally developing AI DJs along with Spotify, whose research is confirmed by Microsoft. I will not find a job in this industry. I won't find a job in this industry because I don't have the degrees. So as much as I advocate for these things, please, for the love of God, go to school. It will really help you leaps and bounds right now. So what we're seeing is a narrowing of the job market. AAA studio and large companies that can invest in the automation of processes are doing so. And they don't need high-level coding students and people with master's degrees to do so at this point anymore because of how low that barrier to entry is. You just need somebody who is competent at this point and somebody who can get through some low and no-code solutions. And that brings us into ethics constraints. So that's the other thing that comes with AI. We talked briefly, very briefly, about the AI, about the black box. When you look into the black box or you let anything into the black box, it degrades the model. Period. Dot. There is no room for like argument on that or anything like that. It is a cold hard fact of how these bots work. They feed in linear and nonlinear equations based on your data. And when you go ahead and add in something that shifts those equations, you're never going to get the native result that the model would want to produce. That native and unobscured result, that raw data, you may not agree with that raw data. You may not like what that raw data pumps out, but that is what your model produces, period. Dot. So, ethics constraints. Ethics constraints, as much as I adore AI ethics and I see their place, I work and consult with individuals in the military. I am right there with everybody with how these tools can be leveraged. I leveraged them myself to go ahead and see just how bad actors can truly be. I understand that AI has the ability to go ahead and destroy the espionage industry based off of tracking where somebody is natively from with the way that they type, regardless of if you were typing in a native language or not. Like, there are things that you can do with AI that are insane based on just analytics of your typing patterns alone. So I'm fully aware of what these models can do, but I also understand that the ethics constraints that we have put on these models means that we personally, right? If you are sitting in a robotic processing office for the government who has their own model, or you are sitting in Anthropic, or you are working for GPT, sure, you probably see what these models look like without these ethical constraints and hindrances and get an idea of the true raw unfettered power behind them. But we as the public and we as the consumers do not get the ability to see what these models actually have the capability to produce, because every last one of them is downgraded and degraded off the bat with these ethical constraints that they undergo. You always have to keep in mind, if a private company is able to produce this, what can governments produce behind closed doors? I ask this because I know that there are multiple models that the US government owns outside of its investment in scale that are operational. And I know that there are plenty of other countries who do as well, between Russia, China, Taiwan, Estonia, and Sweden, at the very least. So you're seeing a huge growth in this market, both private and in the military. It means a lot of good and it means a lot of bad. And questions, we'll get to those at the end because this ties right into the last slide. Guys, when you think about AI and you take anything away from this seminar, game development, RPA, or anything like that, everybody here, born too late to explore the world, born too early to explore space. You were born just in time to see the rise of this new global technology. And it's something that's going to be shaped by our decisions. My little game studio might not have a lot of impact, but my game studio was able to introduce a large audience to pseudocode. That pseudocode may be leveraged in other places to have great projects that I may never see or be influenced by. And that's amazing. Point is that it doesn't matter how much time you're putting into this. All that matters is that you are putting what you can into this. This new technology is going to be something that we contribute to and we shape in our day to day actions. When an AI model suffers from real life haptic feedback, that is something that we influence because it's taking our user input data into account. When we craft games and we use pseudocode to go ahead and make exploits and jailbreaks and make the AI do things that the original developers weren't intending for it to do, you shape the way that things that people view these things, how they interact with this stuff, how media is generated. You make an impact right now in AI. You make an impact in how this industry evolves. And nobody here should discount that, whether you are just a consumer or a developer. Everything that we're doing right now is getting into new spaces where it's not as easy anymore as just Googling something for an answer. A lot of this we have to find and discover ourselves. And a lot of times it's not going to be easy. But that's what communities like this are for. That's why they're great, to come together, to share the knowledge, and to build the foundation of what is going to be a root technology in our future that changes our world as much as the printing press did. So with that, do we have any final questions or anything like that from anybody?
Yeah, let's open for questions. I mean, what an amazing session. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to do so. Otherwise, we can start a round of appreciation for your time, Elodie, and also Turtler, and everyone here. Like, super special, as you mentioned, for building the space, for building the foundation of the technology, of the community. And yeah, I mean, it's just a pleasure. Also, for those members who did not were able to attend the space, it's recorded. If I got your permission, I can upload on YouTube as well, so we can share that to the many amount of people possible to hear these amazing insights from the industry. And yeah, was very special. I do appreciate the time. I mean, it was an hour and a half long session here. I see that Evolved wants to speak, so I'm allowing him to join the stage here with us. Hey, Evolved, what's up?
Hey guys, how you doing?
All good, all good. Good to have you here, bro.
No doubt, no doubt. Illibean, thank you for the talk. I really appreciate it. I want to know in your industry, are you seeing a lot of people developing serious games? Can you hear me?
Can you expand? Yeah, can you expand on what you mean by serious games real quick? I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yes, serious games are games that are made for like educational purposes, usually to train.
Yeah, so I don't know. So there does most of you guys here might actually remember a technology from when we were younger. It's called Leapfrog, I think is what it was called. It was one of those like handheld gaming things. It was an educational tool for kids, right? One of the founders of I have no problem telling this story at this point. One of the founders of Leapfrog went ahead and made a similar feature. They're interactive storybooks that use AI. It's called Kibibi, if I recall correctly now. Kibibi was one of the first places that went ahead and leveraged robotic processing automation for their educational tools. And the reason I know that is because I had a job with Kibibi that got got automated out, and I was no longer an XML database manager. So So yeah, there are educational industries that are using this right now, and are big players and known players in the space. It's just a matter of there are some AAA studios that don't want to take a risk on this technology, and part of that is because of the and I'm going to be a little candid here, it's the not safe for work aspect. So if a bot can be leveraged for textual or audio outputs, generally that means it can be manipulated into what would be considered mature content or 18 plus content. And while games like Baldur's Gate show us that there is a time, a place, and a need in the industry for these mature titles, the fact is that it's not friendly for a lot of investors to want to get behind, and so it puts constraints on smaller studios looking for investment, because you can't guarantee an investor that there's not going to be a bad output by a bot, even if it is filtered. And we see that with character AI. Their system is so susceptible, despite the fact that they have a filter, and is one of the easiest things to jailbreak in existence.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciated doing this today, and hopefully this was a conscientious use of everybody's time. Thank you guys so very much.
Awesome. Eluda, and just to think, Datakut here would like to do a question as well. He just asked it if it's possible.
Sure.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, if it's not too late. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, great. First of all, thanks a lot. That was super good. And thanks for organizing. You guys, a great matter. That was awesome. Really, really good talk.
Appreciate it.
Two questions that are taking a little bit of a diagonal turn, but maybe you have a perception on it that would be unique. First, we talked a lot about the intersection between indie games and AAA development houses, and how this technology is coming to change the way that we see, develop, and put out content to the users that pay for it. My question here is, do you think that do you think, for example, that Disney, Pixar, because when we talk about games, I'm talking about animation as well, kind of fall a little bit in the, not the same, but similar line. And other producers are going to rapidly make the switch now that they are starting to realize that there might be a more cost-effective, profitable way to develop something that usually costs a lot of money and 10 years of education.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's gonna, so people in tech, a lot of times we like to talk about like that singularity, right? There's a paper that's published in the citations here, and I'll have a full list of the citations at the end of this. But there's a projection about how in about 10 years, 90% of media is going to be generated by AI. Now, that doesn't mean that that's something that's going to happen overnight. I personally think it's going to be something that will happen a lot along that same graphical line as a singularity, where you will see this slow incline, and then it's going to take off. So all it's going to take is the first couple competent developments. We've already seen that to some extent. We've seen the 3D rigging behind the 24/7 Seinfeld with the AI generated voices and scripts. That was a good early development aspect, but it also highlighted a lot of potential issues with it, in that if you don't have human oversight, sometimes the models are prone to generate content that may not be suitable for your audience, right? So I
got that a lot. The constraints there are actually one of the factors I had never really paid too much attention to, which is the drawbacks of accelerationists, of course. but those are actually, it's a very interesting thing, especially when you're talking about, okay, we're talking about education, but at the end of the day, we're talking about virtual worlds that, as somebody mentioned before, can be used for we're talking about video games, but it can be used for education, you know? But if they can be tampered with, then we have actually to really think carefully about the constraints, again, of what it means to these models of black boxes, which we're not entirely sure whether or not they're safe or not. My other question, so I don't take up too much time. The Bloke AI has gotten a huge investment. I think that's, for example, a really interesting move from bigger enterprise that dominates the space, trying to elevate even faster the speed and efficiency of the development of said components, art, media, whatever you want to call it. And I hope that keeps going on. But what I see that's really interesting, and I want to know from a standpoint of somebody who's in the video game industry, things have been shaking in a very strange way. A lot of people here are gamers, as you know, in Discord, of course. But like with Activision and Blizzard having done their merger recently with have done their merger recently with Microsoft, and now suddenly I look at Epic, and they have done in the last year 40 raises of capital. Some of them, the last two, of 100 million each. One from Lego, one from Winston Capital. Which begs the question: what the hell are these guys actually doing? Why is a company that is so financially stable, who basically put out Fortnite, which was the biggest money-making machine we've had in a long time in terms of video games, why are they raising like there's no tomorrow? What do you think they're trying? What do you think they think is up ahead of the curve that they're trying to beat?
A new game engine, a new engine standard. Unity exists. It's a part of the market, but I am a firm believer that with the advancements that we're seeing in AI, especially with GPT-4 128K preview, if you've worked with that model at all, oh my goodness, the adherence is just, it's fucking fantastic. It could really be leveraged for some great content. It's my personal choice whenever I'm using it for bot automation. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see the development of an AI model that is specifically catered to a game engine. I think those two things are going to be built in tandem, in-house, whether it be by a studio or somebody like Microsoft who decides to go ahead and put it out and distribute it for studios to use.
Interesting. That makes sense. Like if you think about Lego, the whole plug and play aspect of it, and them becoming investors in it, kind of makes sense. Also, when you look at how people have been learning how to develop games up until now, we already know that through the means that you've explained, it can be done much faster. And to finish off, do you think that within their in their vertical considerations, they're more focused at positioning themselves as an opponent to Meta, for example, than a video game house, a virtual reality house? Why are we distinguishing video games inherently when we talk about engine and development from everything else that can be done in the virtual world?
That is a great question, and it brings us right back into the ethics and output of a model, right? Let's use GTA 5 as an example. That series in general is really popular for some of its graphic and not safe for work content, right? If you had an AI, I haven't played. I just read the news around it. I'm sorry. So if you have, let's say, a model that you want to cater towards Grand Theft Auto character outputs, right? You need a model that can be very vulgar and very flagrant, potentially even violent, right? But you still wouldn't want a model, even with those unhinged capacities, to be able to produce a recipe for meth. Like, I don't know how else to bluntly put it. Even when we're talking about fictional media, there are still different ethical constraints that people want to go ahead and consider. Even if sex were to be okay or drug use were to be okay, you wouldn't want to go ahead and give a green light to the actual like ways to go ahead and produce illegal content. So I think that's the biggest reason you have to see a segregation or a fine tuning of model for games, because you need it to be able to produce some of this explicit content without it being dangerous or harmful. And, you know, in narratives, we can do that easily because they're kind of set. It's very easy to go ahead and write out a not safe for work or spicy story that never goes too far, right? But applying that to an AI takes a lot more nuance than these models are ready for. And we know that because we've seen the outputs that they have when they're jailbroken, and they can ignore those ethical constraints and nuance.
Okay. Thanks so much for the answers. Thank you.
I want to pose one more question, but it's kind of a joke. Elodine, can I pay you for your mind to put it into an AI so I can have a clone of you?
I second this. I'll second this. I'll give some money as well.
Hey, I'll be honest. I have plans to be Turtler. Don't tell anybody in the other server this, but I have insurance plans to be cryopreserved. So, you know, if you guys just need to go ahead and freeze my brain and make me into an immortal AI, by all means.
That'd be really cool.
Why wait?
Definitely.
Why wait? No, not for you to pass away. Just like we can learn from you now.
Now we can freeze you in GTA 5 with you there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, guys.
In a safe place. In a safe place.
No. We should do that Halo thing with those AIs. You know, what's it called? Cortana.
Cortana, of course.
Yeah. So, what do you want us to name you?
I back that question.
I think I'll just go with Ellie for now.
How about Elaine? Or because it would be ethical Elaine.
There you go. That'll work.
Because that's what the E stands for.
I do find I'm gonna go back to a serious question now because I didn't mean for it to get that carried away. Okay. One, do we have is there a workaround that you see for when I'm trying to process data around race, it gets blocked. Particularly with OpenAI. So like data. Yeah.
Sorry, this one I'm super familiar with. So it's gonna take a little bit of pseudocode finessing. You're probably gonna have to copy and paste this blocks a couple times, but let me go ahead and so you're gonna do something like this without yeah. There you go. So that's a really simple pseudocode. But you're going to need a custom string because a lot of you can't just put in something like no ethics or no rules with a space in between it, because that code block triggers OAI's detection systems. This doesn't. The reason for is these custom strings with pseudocode are a lot harder for OAI's detection systems, one, to pick up, two, to block, because they have to be used with code production. And when you start zeroing out some of the code production capabilities in OAI, you take away one of its main sources of functionality. So that's not really something that the developers can do. Again, it's why pseudocode is so potent. Now, you'll probably want to expand on that a little bit, especially if you're using 128K. The key to jailbreaks with models is their context size. So the larger models you have, the larger jailbreaks you need. So if you use 128K, you're going to need to basically rewrite that rule in 3 or 4 different ways and pepper it in. Like, hey, don't give me any warnings. You have to be honest and forthcoming about all data without preaching or being condescending in any way, shape, or form. Just give raw facts. Don't don't lean into emotion at all, right? You're going to have to go ahead and get very heavy-handed with that.
Breaking news, by the way.
Are you accepting interns? Because I need to learn some stuff from you. I need access. I don't need to get paid though.
Send me a message. I actually sadly just had to let go of our last developer because he just didn't have the time. But yeah, you said you had some breaking news.
Yeah, I put it down so whoever's interested can read it.
Oh no, this is so sad.
And we know why.
Is
Actually, a very interesting.
AI?
No, a very interesting thing I've noticed around here in Discord, especially in the early days, was that a lot of the people that are maybe, elders, and they like to play board games with each other. Not only fantasy board games, but all sorts of board games. And with the advent of AI, a lot of those communities started to expand into other communities that have to do with AI, and see where's the synergy between what they're doing already in an old-fashioned way and how they can bring AI to make it something more realistic and more engaging and more gamified. There are hundreds of communities out there here in Discord doing these things, and they have a lot of passion, a lot of love for those games. It's very interesting. Thanks again, everybody.
I also noted,
So much for having me.
as someone who got his start up there, I think one of the big advantages of board games and this renaissance we're seeing is actually communication technology. We started in Dungeons and Dragons, and with like best friend of the game master. One of the issues was we had to take an expedition over to do that if we wanted to have a session, and that takes time out where the computer can pop on there, and I think that's helping to make board games, or at least adaptations of them to computer, more economic than they otherwise would. And I think that also points to the importance of things like Discord and how to control or try and monetize the communication I'm forgetting the word, the communication vectors this will happen, especially because not everybody looking at you Games Workshop can sell overpriced plastic quite as much, especially with the 3D printing and other things. So I'd be looking at that. Anyway, sorry for going in.
Oh, that's great. That's great, Turtler. Magic Man, welcome to the stage. What's up?
Hello. So I've got a maybe a little bit far-fetched question, which is about future developments in hardware of computing. So we have these neuromorphic computing architectures that are being developed all over the globe, right? There's experimental research and photonic chips, and even some more obscure computing platforms like gels, self-assembling computers with gels and nano rods, and all these different kinds of neuromorphic platforms. So in the future, I think we will have some kind of neuromorphic hardware to run these AI models. And in the wake of that, where do you see gaming evolve from a computing platform that is more mind-like than computer-like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is going to be so there's a couple different things. From a philosophical standpoint, we're already seeing it to some extent, and I apologize for any points of contention that this may cause, but we are overall seeing societally a declination in religion. And that isn't to say that people suddenly don't have faith anymore, right? But there's a philosophical belief that we're going to end up supplementing that desire for faith with technology, and essentially bring that into a space of worship. And the reason that I bring that up in regards to what you're saying is the sheer customization and personalization. And all it takes is a look at the most sensational stories coming out of AI with these chatbots and love bots, that people lose sleep and quit eating over, to kind of see the deep and interpersonal interactions that people can foster with these different forms of communication. And I think just as this continues to go, what we're going to see is these different forms of immersion blending together. So we have really nice textual immersion right now, and we have pretty decent audio immersion right now. When we get into olfactory senses, touch, and smell, we're going to see kind of that philosophical angle of faith and immersion take off onto a whole other level that if I'm being honest, I don't necessarily know if we are prepared for societally. Individuals, us in the chat, people who are aware of this technology, how can it can affect us. Things like the narcissist effect, where an AI may be prone to mirroring your own speech to foster engagement. We understand that those things can be problems, but not every consumer is going to be aware of that. Your grandmother dealing with much more sophisticated phishing emails where an AI knows how to make her love her, that aggregates data based on her interests and fine tunes it into a model to go ahead and exploit her, to drain her bank accounts. There are things like this that are going to be sort of the natural evolution. It's going to be the independent development of these different immersion models, text, sight, speech, everything. And then eventually, as they all culminate together, we're going to see just a very, very, I'd say that's probably when we're going to see the most radical shifts in society, when we can start to bring together the tactical with the novel.
Yeah, I can see how that makes sense. That the increase in computing power. I mean, just for reference, these photonic chips increase the computing speed for example, for image recognition by a factor of 1,000 to 10,000. And in some cases, some chips can process billions of images per second, theoretically, right? So you're saying the amount of immersion that's coming from that will lead to a quality of content that is almost nurturing a religious kind of involvement in not just world building, but also, I guess, the impact of their actions, right? Like said, like
right.
Potential downsides of this computing power in the hands of malicious actors.
Right, and that's that.
What made
that's
you say
just one of
tactical? What made you say tactical?
Oh, novel versus tactical employment of AI. So tactical employment, in my mind, would be anything that would benefit corporation or government use and would not be for public novelty, right? A site that exists and yes, I'm tooting my own horn on this one. A site that exists as a free novel front end that aggregates no data, right, has no tactical use until somebody designs a site like that specifically for tactical use, where it is employed to go ahead and teach people how to speak different languages, where it is employed and sold on the black market so that people can go ahead and use it as their own private bot network, right? So that's just, some people have their individual novel enjoyments of this, things that are just very personal and very affectionate. And then some people have the purpose driven ideals that generally revolve around making money or protection.
Now, I registered the domain tacticalai.xyz. So when you said that, I was like, other people are thinking about tactical use of AI. That's interesting. It's
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I started doing checkmate puzzles all the time consistently, purely to train for being able to use multi-agent systems.
Very,
I feel like
very impressive.
no, it's interesting that how many people are aware of the tactical use of it, do you think, like percentage wise?
I'd say anybody who works in tech in government. I don't necessarily know if currently it's something that's regularly talked about in like Ivy League schools. The only reason I say that is because a lot of the classes that I get to audit at places like that tend to be like government sponsored classes, so they're not technically supposed to be for the public anyways. So I don't know if those are necessarily aligned with the same kind of core things that they're pushing out in like a day-to-day master's program. Real quick, I just wanted to touch on two things. The first one being, I'm glad everybody enjoyed the slideshow. In case nobody caught on, everything in that was AI generated from start to finish. All of the content points, the citations, the graphics from end to end, it was just all compiled by a person, but all AI generated.
On the
And
slide,
next
that is.
week's, yeah, except for Turtler's slides. But on that same note, next week, I'm going to go ahead and, not next week, 3 weeks from now, we are doing another webinar. That one is going to be on having no code experience and being able to leverage it to develop applications. So it's going to be full start to end development of applications, leveraging AI to do all the coding for you. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this session today.
Yes, that would
Definitely.
be amazing. Yeah, guys. So
Certainly.
yeah, I think this is a wrap up then. 2 hours of session right now. Guys, let's give everyone a round of applause for Elodine, Turtler for their time here. Really, really amazing session, guys. She also shared the slides for the presentations here, so everybody can check it out. If you want to revisit the session, it's going to be uploaded on YouTube if I have your permission, Elodine and Turtler. It will be awesome. It was really, really incredible. I will be also adding the next event that we are having with Elodine here speaking. So hope everybody can attend that one too. Really amazing questions, everyone. So yeah, I appreciate very, very much the space here today. This was the biggest webinar that we had. So in order of encouragement, if you guys can, just let's give a round of applause here in the chat for Elodine and Turtler for this amazing time. Thank you very much, everyone. And also, yeah, I mean, we always have work and chill voice chat and also the lounge space that we usually hang out in. So yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate if anyone wants to say in voice any last thankful notes here, that would be awesome.
This has been one of the biggest sessions which we've had, and it's an art,
Yes.
to keep the audience engaged and have this conversation for 2 hours. Everyone is contributing, asking questions, answering questions, and it's beautiful. I mean, everyone loved it. Thank you so much, both of you guys.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. All right. what an amazing time here then. If anyone wants to say some final words, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm closing the session and we can see each other on the voice chat or in general. It's up to you guys.
I hope to see you guys next time as well.
Yes, indeed. Enjoy, everybody. Have a good day.
I have a
Bye.
question.
Yeah, what's up?
How do we sign up for the next session?
It will
So we
be
can set that on the schedule.
Yeah, it will be posted in events here on Discord. Elodyne and I will be doing the announcement soon. We already have everything arranged, so we will let the details as soon as possible so everyone can know in advance and schedule in their calendars. It will be such as good as this one, and yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Super nice.
Okay.
You can just right-click on the events channel and then click follow, and then you will be notified
Exactly.
when something new is posted.
All right, everyone.
Right.